Welcome to Novice to Master.
I'm glad to have you join me today. Today's kind of a big surprise for everyone. On the show today, we have Dr. Benjamin Hardy. He is a psychologist, a best-selling author with his book Willpower Doesn't Work, and he's also the #1 blogger on medium.com. How are you doing today?
Doing awesome, man. Doing really cool. How about you?
Doing pretty good here. Pretty excited to have you on the podcast, man. I appreciate you taking the time out to do that.
Of course.
So you want to share a little bit of, about you with everyone?
Sure. Yeah, I live here in Orlando, Florida with my wife and 5 kids. We adopted our oldest 3 kids from South Carolina, where I did my PhD, and it was a crazy 3-year battle trying to get these 3 kids. But once we adopted them, which was amazing, we found out a month later that my wife was pregnant, which is a lot to handle for a single year. But you adjust, you adapt. Human beings are far more adaptable than we give ourselves credit for. So yeah, that's kind of it, man. I've studied psychology, and I'm a writer. I write a lot of stuff, and obviously we're here to talk about personality isn't permanent, but just happy to be with you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, man. I'm glad to have you here. Ben was nice enough to send over a copy of it, and I've gotten to look through it. It is a good book. There's actually quite a few parts in it that really stick with you. We were talking about the one that stuck with me the most before we got on the podcast, about the personality test that almost kept you from getting married.
Yeah, I'll share that story. Should I share that story with your peeps?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, yeah. This is, pretty funny story, to be honest with you. And I didn't even plan to have this in the story. We kind of threw it in at the end. But anyways, back when I was in college, there was a popular personality test called the Color Code. And my score on that test it was so concerning to my in-laws that they were very concerned about my wife marrying me. Like she was a girlfriend at the time, but they were like, don't really think you should marry this guy. Like his score on this test really concerns us. So anyways, I'll kind of tell you. So the Color Code breaks people into 4 categories. One is you've got reds, which are like type A, power hungry, not that worried about other people. Blues are very like heart-centered, very much focused on other people, very relationship-based. Whites are basically like your aloof dreamers. They're just in their head, just thoughtful but peaceful people. And then your yellows are just like your total people. Like they're just like the party people, life of the party extroverts. So anyways, Lauren, who was my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, like she was considered a red. Her family was like a pretty red family. Like they're like, we're this type of people, pretty intense from a lot of people's perspectives. Once you get to know me, you realize that that's not really the situation. But anyways, it's important to realize my wife was actually married before she met me. She got married when she was like 19, really young. And the guy she married was a red, just this super, and, he ended up becoming incredibly abusive. He was just like abusive in all forms and fashions for about 3 years, to the point where my wife became like a shell of herself, like no personality. And she ended up having to get out of there. Traveled the world for a few years, did a church mission, kind of reinvented herself. And I happened to be the first person that she seriously dated after all of that. And so when her parents found out that I was a white on the Color Code, they were like, uh-oh. They're like, Lauren had such a negative prior marriage where she got so dominated that she never wants to get dominated again. And so she's in this relationship with this white, who's this passive, aloof guy, so that it's obvious that she's dating him because she's too afraid to be controlled and manipulated again. And so she's going to be the controller of this situation. And they're kind of a patriarchal family. So they're like, we need, we know what you're doing, and we need you to you think about this. You should really be married to a real man. We know that what happened in the past was scary, and you don't want to be dominated again, but that doesn't mean that there's not good guys out there. You can't just marry this white. You need a real man. You don't need a white. And so that's, they viewed me that way, where I was just this passive, that's the only way that they saw me because of my score on that test. And I thought it was pretty funny, but yeah, she was very concerned. They were concerned. And ultimately they had to break through that in order for me to get married to her. But it took a lot.
Yeah, that's crazy to me to think that even that would even be a considering factor in anything.
I mean, it's a considering factor for jobs. I mean, you know what I mean?
I guess it's true. It's not so much stock people put in this. And I remember back when in the 90s, I guess it was, everybody, there was all kinds of these personality tests all over the place. And I know they're still present a lot in like social media, but that was when they just kind of started rolling them out as a do it for fun thing. And it was just always funny to me how much people got into it. I never was. I was like, okay, this is just a dumb little test on the internet. And it's just nuts to hear, how a story like that, like how much that could have really changed your life.
I know. My wife and I have 5 kids together. Like that wouldn't have happened. I'd be married to someone else. I'd be married to someone who wasn't so discriminative. The thinking actually is very similar to the thinking that goes into racism. And from like a psychological perspective, there's no such thing as personality types. Like that's actually a totally surface level view of personality that no real psychologist would actually adopt. And so these types of tests are actually like, they're not really considered good science. They kind of, we would, as a psychologist, we throw them into the category of like horoscopes. Like they're just kind of like pseudoscience. But they do have a lot of impact on people's identity. People take them really serious. They're huge in pop culture. What was interesting from my perspective, because like I really didn't take the test that seriously. I had gone through so much change at that point. I think I was like I was 24 years old at this point. But I had grown up in a crazy environment. I talk about it in the book. My dad was an extreme drug addict when I was, when my parents got divorced when I was 11. Like I had gone through so much and had overcome crazy obstacles. Went on a church mission myself, actually right in your neck of the woods, and just had gone through crazy transformational experiences. And by the time they met me, I was like in an amazing college, getting straight A's, and I was like focused on this huge future that I was completely committed to accomplishing. And so I just thought it's kind of funny that they're seeing me this way because of my score on this stupid test. Like, and obviously like one of the problems with these tests is that you're not going to get the same score over and over again, that context matters a lot. Like, so like my score on that test which was a white, was kind of related to where I was at as a person at the time. I was studying psychology extremely as a college student. So of course I was really interested in introspection and interested in like, and so I just kind of focused on my test score on that, which gave me a white. But like I was actually asked recently to retake the test just to kind of see if I'd get the same score. And it was interesting looking at the test again because it's such a poorly designed test. I mean, I'm telling you, it is like, there's a lot of concerns from like a true good science perspective on that test design. But I ended up scoring as a yellow because actually one of the things I didn't realize is that with that particular test, it asks you to rate yourself on various situations on how you would respond as a child. And that's actually a big problem because you can't actually answer that question accurately. Like how could you answer how you would respond to situations as a kid? Like you can't fully know, No,
that's true.
But anyways, I came out as a yellow and my wife was like, this is ridiculous. She actually came out as a white when she took the test again.
Right on. There you go.
But at one point is your personality is going to change no matter what. And that these tests should be taken with a radical salt, and they create a lot more problems than they solve.
I got you. No, I totally understand that. I mean, I've taken them just like employment history. So many jobs will have you take some form of a test of personality. They'll take I went to sign up for the Army at one point when I was younger, and the first thing they had you do was hit this test that told them whether or not you were trustworthy with a gun. And if you did not land this, you did not get it. They would not let you in. You were all right to join the Navy or the Air Force, but you could not join certain sections of the Army. And literally the tests they're giving now, I really didn't feel like they actually really reflect or tell anything, because it's like, if you were given the choice, are you an alcoholic, a loser, or boring? Well, I'm none of them.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That's one of the big problems with these tests.
Yeah.
They give you a forced choice that's like none of the options. Yeah. How would you define yourself? As a loser, a drug addict, or an alcoholic?
Yeah.
I guess I'll pick the one that's like the closest to being.
Like it was just weird, because I think one of them even asked, if you had the chance to take money from work and you felt it was okay, would you take the money and run, buy alcohol, or do drugs? And it's like, how do you answer this? There's no skip. There's no, I'm like, the weird thing was I was told by somebody that what it's checking for is to decide if you're a liar. I'm like, well, if I answered half these questions at all, I'm a liar. It's, I don't know.
That's pretty funny.
But yeah, I know in the book you talk about the Myers and Briggs test. I'm not sure how you pronounce the other one, but you talk about how
Oh,
unscientific they
Enneagram
are.
as well, right?
Enneagram. Okay, yeah. Wasn't sure how to. I'd never heard of it before, but I know you describe them as unscientific and harmful. Does it go further into what we've already discussed on it, or all right?
Definitely.
How far in does it go?
I'll give a little bit more.
All right, cool.
Basically, they are harmful. I'll tell you why people love these tests.
Okay.
They love them because they give you a sense of identity. Identity is important because identity gives you kind of a way of explaining yourself and a way of relating to yourself. Identity is the story you tell about yourself. And if you haven't done a lot of work at framing how you describe your past and your future, then these tests can give you a way of understanding yourself. And so you can use the label as your identity. I am an INFJ. I'm a white, so you can use that to help people understand you. But the label ends up becoming a fixed mindset. Usually when you've adopted an aspect of your identity, you usually try to defend it rather than disconfirm it. Like if something's your identity, you defend it. You can't really have a good conscious conversation about it. It's one of the reasons why people have a hard time talking about religion and politics. Yeah. Excuse me. Is because they can't have a normal, healthy conversation because they defend their identity and they seek to confirm it. A lot of research these days now, and I would point to Harvard research by Daniel Gilbert. He has a TED Talk called The Psychology of Your Future Self. It's about a 6-minute TED Talk, and he's a Harvard psychologist, but he studied kind of how people change over time. And about how it's kind of, I'll test it on you real quick. I'll test how so have you heard me talk about this before or no?
No, I haven't.
Okay, cool. So basically, he asks the question, I'll ask you, do you feel like you're the exact same person you were 10 years ago?
No, definitely not, no.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, like, honestly, that's what almost everyone says. And it's kind of obvious. Like, in 10 years, you go through a lot of change, right? You've seen the world differently. You have probably different goals, priorities, probably different friends to some degree, different focus. It would actually be weird if you were quite the exact same person. That would cause some alarms. But here's what's kind of funny, what Gilbert finds. So it's like, okay, so it's good to recognize that you're not the same person you were in the past. Like you're a different person. You should have empathy towards your former self, not judgment, but like they are a different person. The same principle should be applied to your future self, but people often don't do this. So yeah, most people would answer the first question the same way you would, but with the second question, which is, do you think that your future self will be just as different as you are from where you were 10 years ago? Most people say no. Most people think that who they are today is, for the most part, who they're going to be. And actually, if you would have asked yourself that question 10 years ago, you would have answered the same way. No, I'll probably be similar to who I am right now. Because we just kind of have this assumption that who we are today is who we'll be, even though it's actually not true. Your future self is going to be just as different and so you should, as a result, you shouldn't overemphasize your current self. You shouldn't spend too much time overly defining your current self because it will change. But also if you take the time to define the future self you plan to have or plan to be, you can start using that as the basis for the choices you make. And if you're being consistent with choices towards your future, by nature, you're going to be kind of inconsistent towards your choices of the past. So your past will stop being the thing dictating your behavior, and your future will start to be. And obviously then you'll start changing. But a lot of people, they've spent so much time defining themselves, which these tests kind of have you do, that they become non-flexible towards defining a future self that's different. And they're not willing to change. Instead, they seek to defend who they currently are. So the tests really create a fixed mindset where they stop you from imagining a new version of yourself. They stop you from growing. They lead to inflexibility towards situations that are outside the label. They're really bad for growth and development, to be honest with you.
Right on. Yeah, I totally understand it, especially the way you just brought it up with that those questions. And to be honest with you, to follow along with the point is 10 years ago, if you would have asked me if I think my future self would be different, the answer, you were right, it would have been no. kind of back then I thought that was what I wanted to be, and it was headed the direction I wanted to go. Um, but to ask me today, the answer changed, so
Because you're probably someone seeking growth at this point, right?
yeah,
You're someone
definitely.
living more intentionally, more courageously. You're obviously, if you're having these kind of conversations, you're someone seeking growth. You're an entrepreneur, so it's like you're someone who has a vision for yourself, and you're striving to grow out of your current self into a more evolved version. So like, like that's the way you should be. Like, I don't know if you ever read the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
No, I've heard the title before, but I've never read
Dude,
it.
that one's worth reading. So
Is it?
he survived the Holocaust. He was a Jew that went through the German, concentration camps back like 50 years ago, more than that, back during World War II. He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning that describes his experience in the Holocaust, and he was a psychologist, and so he kind of broke it down. But it was really interesting because he talked about how and especially in that negative of a situation where you're like starved and like you're seeing people get killed all the time and you're in there for years. He said that the only way to actually find joy was you had to have a sense of purpose for your situation. You had to have a future. If you could see a future beyond the Holocaust and like have a sense of purpose in your life, then that could give you meaning in the present. And that meaning allowed you to endure the present, and because you had a future. But he said that the moment people lost hope in their future, they quickly lost meaning in the moment and they died. Like their bodies shut down, they died because they were being starved. And so it's important to have a future to strive for in order to even have meaning and perspective in the present.
It's an awesome way to look at it. I know, like, and just myself alone right now, actually, between what I've learned and some of the coaches I've had and mentors, one of the things that, they've kind of pushed, which goes along with this, is the idea of the fact that I need to think down the road, or the way they put it in marketing is you need to think about the back end offer. And it's,
Nice.
which I'm sure you understand what I mean by that. Most people in marketing will. It's the same thing. You're thinking more about down the road than what you are now. You're taking care of right now with the focus of right now building up to that back end. I guess it's kind of a similar way to explain
It totally is. I love that. Yeah. So like there's a guy named Hal Hirschfield. He's a psychologist at UCLA, which is in
it.
California. And he's spent a lot of time studying how having a future self influences your decisions today. So like if you see your future self first off as a different person than you are today, then you could make decisions based on what your future self would want, not based on what you solely want. Because sometimes what you want in the moment is just to drown yourself in Facebook or YouTube,
Yeah.
and to like sometimes your current preferences aren't necessarily in the best interest of your future self, right?
Yeah.
And so when you think about what would your future self have you do, then you can make decisions that are more intentional. So it's really good for decision making. Like, just as an example, like when I leave work after a busy day, I'm pretty tired, and I've got 5 kids who want to play. And so like a couple days ago, my son Logan was basically asking, Dad, let's go swim. And I was pretty fried. I didn't really want to. And I just thought, I'll just watch you swim because we have a pool in our backyard. Like in Florida, it's pretty common.
Yeah.
And then I was just thinking about it, sitting there watching him play and swimming, and him asking me to swim. And I was thinking, how would my future self want to remember this? Like, if I was watching this on like video, like in 5 years from now, would I be proud of the person I'm being just sitting there staring at my phone while my son's asking me to play? And the answer is obviously no. So it's like, rather than doing what I want to in the moment, what my current preference, let my future self's preferences dictate the decision, and it allows you to make a more intentional decision. I went and jumped in the pool and had a blast, and I was then happy with the decision I made. In that way, the future dictated my behavior, not my past or not my current preferences.
Right on. Yeah, I think honestly everybody'd benefit in any and every aspect of their life thinking about it that way. But it's funny, like bringing up the fact of wanting to be on Facebook. A lot of people battle with that. And the weird thing is, it feels like it's a trap, Facebook almost, because even
it's a vortex, dude. It just sucks you in, and it's an escape. And usually if you don't have a clear future you're committed to, you're seeking to escape the present because you don't have much meaning. I think Frankl hit the nail on the head. Without a purpose giving your present meaning, you're seeking to escape the present through distraction.
Definitely. Yeah, it's I don't know. I've noticed like even mentors of mine will be like, okay, when you get on here, do not look at anything. It's kind of like, I'm trying to think what that story, it's kind of like the story of Medusa. Do not look in, don't look her in the eyes.
Well,
But
there's so BJ Fogg, he's a psychologist at Stanford. So the people who he taught at Stanford were the ones who went and made Instagram. They took his behavior design, like he's one of the biggest behavior design psychologists in the world, and he talks a lot about how design beats willpower. So how something is designed can either kill your willpower, or you can set up a situation so you don't need willpower to do the right thing. But social media is designed to essentially manipulate your willpower so that it runs out so that you can get caught up in it, right? Like, and so when you jump onto those situations, they're designed to make you get addicted. They're designed to feed your dopamine. You know what I mean? So like your willpower is not going to be very strong against how well designed those things are.
I got you. So it's almost, when you bring in dopamine, the first thing to pop into mind is it's almost like a drug or a sedative.
I mean, that's what they say, is that, cell phone addiction, smartphone, I mean, that stuff lights up the same areas in your brain as cocaine. So like, it's obviously maybe not as potent, but it's just as addictive, which is why people get on it 50 times a day, is because it's been designed to addict them.
Yeah. One thing I've always kind of wondered, and this may be something a little bit outside of what we've talked about, but it honestly, you'd probably have just as much of a grasp on it. And maybe this is more of an opinion thing, but when you look at a lot of the people who, aren't looking at their future selves and they're stuck in their own present personalities, is it kind of like a personal thing, whether it's they let it limit themselves or they get stuck in it? Or, I mean, is it like a habitual kind of thing for them to excuse themselves? You understand what I'm saying? I'm maybe
Yeah,
wording it
totally.
wrong. Okay.
No, this is good stuff. We'll clarify the question because this is on point. This is good stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Basically what I'm asking is more, I guess, along the lines of, is it more of them excusing themselves to be stuck in that, or more of the idea of they let it trap them?
There's a lot of reasons why we get stuck. Ultimately, yes, it's them excusing themselves, but that's not really how it feels while you're doing it. We're all kind of excusing ourselves from something that we need to change, like all of us are. But people who are really stuck in the past, like one of the things that shapes personality is trauma. And like any negative experience that shapes how you see yourself. So it could be something extreme, like you're in an abusive marriage or your parent gets killed. Like you can have something crazy happen, or trauma can also be something as small as someone telling you you're ugly and you believe it, right? Like it's just, and so like often people are trapped by the meanings that they gave to former experiences. So if someone tells you you're ugly, like that doesn't actually mean it's true, but you accepted that, you gave that meaning, and you agreed to some degree, or whatever you did, you felt hurt and you said, oh, it must be true. So often it's about having to reframe how you view former experiences, changing the meaning of those events so that they're no longer limiting you. Like if, for example, you started a business and you failed, you could then say, I can't do business anymore, right? Like you could define yourself by the past, and the way to move forward would be that you have to reframe the meaning of that event to be like, okay, maybe I wasn't quite as good as I needed to be, or maybe I had the wrong idea, or maybe I just needed, you have to change how you view it so it can be learning and education versus like this defining thing. And so if you can choose better meanings for your past so that it's education and learning versus something terrible that happened to you. I mean, even my wife had to choose, ultimately she didn't want to be in that crappy marriage, but she ultimately chose to say, I made that choice. I ignored the red flags. I learned a lot, and I know 100% that that's not what I want in my future. And so like I can have a better so like she's using the past as high quality information, which is what it could be, rather than unresolved emotion. And so it's about choosing how you frame it, choosing how you deal with it, and ultimately going back to the future. And so that's just one of the reasons. One of the other reasons why people get stuck is their narrative, that they continue to explain themselves so definitively based on their past or their present. They haven't actually conceptualized a future self. They haven't taken the time to decide who they want to be and then started to tell that new story. I mean, that's what you really need to do. That's where real progress starts to take form. Like, for example, with addiction, I know that someone's ready to overcome an addiction when they start opening up about it and admitting that they've got problem and admitting that they no longer want that they no longer want to be the person that they've been, but that they want to be someone healthier and better. Like once someone can just say, I don't want what I've been currently doing, and they no longer have the ego to hide it, but they just say, I genuinely want to be someone different than I am today. Then it's like, okay, that's a big step, because it takes courage to do that. Once you start opening up and being honest that you want to move in a positive direction and move forward in your life, then, you need to make the time to conceptualize what that future self is. As for you, for example, at some point or another, you decide that the future version of you is going to be doing podcasts and doing marketing or something. Like before you were doing that, at some point you decide that that's what you wanted to do, and now you've been doing it. And so like, it's the idea of living intentionally and living from design and living, and choosing who you want to be, and then ultimately telling people that that's where you want to go, and then investing in that future identity and moving, getting trained and moving in that direction, becoming that person. Definitely. So yeah, they can do it, but we get caught up for multiple reasons. Even environment, that would be another one, where your environment just keeps you, your peer group, you're staying with the same friends, like they can keep you trapped in your current or former identity as well.
Yeah, I can't remember who I heard explain that last bit talking about friends, but or who came up with this explanation, but they related it to crabbing at the beach. When you start throwing the crabs in the bucket, the one who tries to climb out will be pulled back by the others. And that kind of gave me more of a connection with the idea, like a visualization for it, to really picture it for myself after I heard it.
If you think about personality from that perspective, though, if your environment is trying very hard to keep you the person you've been, right, it can be hard to change. So you've got to change that environment and those peer group. I mean, there's a lot of research that your peer group predicts basically everything about you, from the amount of money you make to how, if you're religious or not, to whether you're a drug addict. Like, I mean, peer group predicts a lot of things. And so, yeah. And so what happens is, if you decide you're ready, you really want to have a certain future self and to live a certain life, that you want to make more money, or if you want to be happier, if you want to be in shape, you've got to look at your environment. You got to be honest about it. Like if your environment is conflicting with your goal, then you're probably not going to get there unless you change your environment. And I think a big step of that, and that doesn't mean you have to be freaking rude towards your friends or family, but it means you have to start being honest. All progress starts by telling the truth. And so you need to say, look, I really want to do these things and I need support in doing it. And if you would prefer not to support me, I need to go and get support, because I no longer want to be just chilling or doing the stuff I've been. I really am serious about this stuff, and this is where I'm going to go. And some of your friends or people might disagree or try to be those crabs pulling you back, and and if that's the case, then those people need to be kind of distanced from, to some degree, if you're serious about making these changes. Over time, if you're serious about that change, and if you commit and if you make progress, they will eventually come back seeking advice and help. As weird as that sounds. Like I've had a lot of friends who, like from high school as an example, like I had to distance myself from them for several years while I was getting my PhD and building my life. And now they're, showing back up and like wanting to learn from me, as an example. So like it doesn't mean you have to shove them off forever, but it means if you're going to get discouraged, then every time you're going to be around them, you're going to be essentially forced to be your former self. And that's going to limit your confidence to move forward towards your future self. And if you're serious about that, then you need to do it.
I got you. Yeah, I've seen that before, like in some of the people I knew, because as life has gone on, that's one of the things, is more and more I've identified my own need to change and my own need to grow and leave this
freaking
behind.
Awesome, dude.
It's just kind of, at some point, everybody has to look at it and go, either I'm happy with the way things are now, or there's got to be something more. And the further you move towards, I've noticed the same, where just slowly I've started, distancing from people. But yeah, it's definitely awesome to hear somebody that's got a PhD put that into words. But yeah,
that's kind of what my book is for, man, is just to put it in words for people.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to get a physical copy of it. I have a digital copy to look over, which, like I said, you guys were nice enough to send that over to me. There's just some weird connection with the physical book versus.
Oh, it's so nice
digital,
to open a book. It's really nice to just open a book and read it. I'm with you, man. And with this book, like I said, there's like 150 journal prompts in this book. And so like you can just read it, and if you want, you can pull out your journal and answer some of the questions, as far as reframing former experiences or really designing out your future self. So it's hopefully a lot of good information, but also kind of a playbook.
I got you. That's awesome though that you've laid it out like that for everyone. Now, it's not due out till, well, I guess by the time we post
June
this, it'll be
16th. Yeah.
out that day, because June 16th will be the day this episode goes live. I am going to include a couple links for anybody who's seen them. I have a link for the pre-order that I'm going to throw on a few episodes for you.
That's rad, dude.
It's definitely, like, from what I've gotten to read of it, it's definitely a good book, and there's a lot of really, really good information. I'll be honest with you, I was kind of surprised when we first started talking to find out that a guy with the title of doctor, who's that smart and that accomplished, is this down to earth and cool to talk to be honest.
I'm glad, dude. I mean, freak,
Yeah.
I'm just a pretty normal person, like freaking sports and normal stuff. I mean, I enjoy life, and I'm not some high in the sky guy. I'm just like, these are real ideas, you know, and they're,
Yeah.
you know, so I'm hopefully a pretty normal human being, but I am pretty committed to big goals at the same time. You know what I mean? And learning, but dude, really love just kicking it, chilling, you know.
That's awesome.
I mean, I grew up snowboarding. Like I grew up in Utah, and so like I snowboarded all day and was big into snowboard culture, and like you know, I mean, I don't know, man. I still watch skate videos all the time. You know what I mean? Like on Thrasher and stuff like that. And so
Oh,
I mean,
man.
I'm still a normal human being, but you know, these ideas are really interesting, and psychology is very interesting, and I think it's good to just look at the truth of the situation, which is, you know, why people get stuck and how you can change. And if you're someone who wants to be happy, you kind of got to move that life forward. So I think I appreciate you saying I'm down to earth.
Yeah, it's definitely cool.
Thanks, man. That's cool. Try to be.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit nervous. I'm like, man, do I
What's
call
this guy
Dr.
gonna be
Hardy
like?
or
No.
Yeah,
What is this guy gonna be like?
That's nuts though. That's cool to hear you're a snowboarder. So was I in high school.
Were you?
Actually, yeah, I grew up 10 minutes from a ski resort. I used to go up there all winter long. It was really
Was
cool.
that
I
up in
loved it.
Wisconsin, you were saying?
No, that was Maryland.
Oh, Maryland. Yeah,
I
Maryland.
was where we lived at. I was right on the border of Pennsylvania. We used to go, I think it was like 10, 15 minutes driving to go to Whitetail Ski Resort in Pennsylvania. We used to go up there all the time.
Dude, that's cool. Yeah,
It was
it's good
definitely
times.
a time. Yeah. Another thing I got to ask you about, the blog on medium.com. How did it feel to be like the number one on medium.com?
It was interesting. Yeah. It was interesting. For a long time, my blogs would just, everyone went viral. Like, you know, you just get so much momentum and you're in the algorithms and things like that, that like, I mean, one of the big ideas in this book is honestly to not get too attached to a status or a persona.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So like some people that could get to their heads, you know, maybe it did for me for a while, but I kind of knew that it was temporary, you know, like, and I'm definitely not defined by that now, although it was really awesome. And I'm actually getting back into Medium, but it was cool. You know, it was really cool to like put stuff out there and for it to resonate. It was interesting though, because back in the day on Medium, very different platform than it is today. Like they had like what's called their top 20, and like basically they were the most like trending articles on the platform. Like they don't do that anymore. They control everything on Medium. They control the algorithms. I mean, it's not as good of a platform as it used to be, but I mean, I would post articles and immediately my article would just go to the top, you know, and it would get like 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 views like in a few hours. And like, you know, there'd be times where I'd have like 5 to 8 articles in the top 20 at once. You know what I mean? And like, it was interesting. I mean, I definitely took it for granted. If I could relive it, I would be a lot more appreciative of it and I would work harder. You know, I think I started to take it extremely for granted for a few years, and I could have utilized it a lot more if I would have realized how cool the situation actually was. But it came so fast and so easy, and it was good timing. There was just a lot of elements to it. That, I mean, I still utilize it, you know, and I posted hundreds of articles and got amazing success from it. But if I could relive it now with maybe a little bit more maturity and humility, I would do it differently.
Right on. Yeah, that was actually the first time I ever heard your name. Was I got into publishing on Medium, and one of my friends who does, another copywriter, I went through, they set up like a little challenge for a writing every day for 30 days on Medium. And that was, they actually talked about, it was very first introduction. He's the #1 blogger on Medium. And
Who was it by chance?
Her name's Heidi Anspaugh.
Oh, never heard of her.
Yeah. She's another copywriter, which what I do now. So, but yeah, she was kind of teaching more along the lines of the way the new algorithms go and all that. And I was fairly proud of it. I mean, it's, it's not anything now, but I actually managed to get curated on one article. I was like, yeah.
Dude, that's good, dude. Every small win counts, dude.
Definitely.
I mean, that takes you in the right direction, man. I mean, that's a huge victory, dude. And so definitely that's freaking cool. I mean, any small win is something to be hugely celebrated, and they're big wins. They're big wins when they happen.
Definitely. So, another thing I wanted to ask you about, how did it feel when you found out you were having your 2 twins? Was it a shock completely, or no?
We actually did in vitro.
Oh, did you? Okay, so you guys kind of knew it was coming.
We didn't know it would work though, because we had tried in the past and it didn't work. And so it was different, going from adoption to straight. And we didn't know it was going to be twins.
Oh.
So we didn't know it was going to work, and we didn't know it was going to be twins. And so when we found out it was twins, it was like crazy, But I'm to a point now where I'm pretty flexible towards situations and towards the future. I mean, I still get caught up in my own self, but I've kind of gone through enough where I'm like, I know I can adapt to the situation. Like if they had told us it was 4 kids, it would have sucked, but I'm like, we would have adapted to it, And so you adapt, I like the quote from Will Durant that the ability of the average person could be doubled if the situation demanded it. And I've kind of just realized that over and over, it's about putting yourself in demanding situations and rising to the challenge. And you can do it, and you evolve into that new version of yourself. So it was good, man. And obviously the twins are super cute now. They're both running around, they're like 16, 18 months old, and they're starting to gabber and talk a little bit, and they're just running all over the place. They're cute, dude.
Right on. Yeah, I got a 4-year-old.
Do you?
Yeah.
Boy or girl?
Boy.
Nice. What's his name?
Asher.
Freaking awesome, dude.
He's a cute little dude. I mean, he's got 2 older brothers too, and
nice.
But it was I read that in your book, and I had to ask about it. I was like, man, because the way you wrote it out was just like, you said it. I didn't catch the part about the in vitro, but
I didn't mention that part.
I didn't think so, but yeah, I was like, wow, that's a heck of a surprise.
It kind of was. I mean, we didn't know it was gonna be twins. It was, and honestly, truth be told, we had tried to get pregnant for over 6 years, and we had done just about everything you could do. And so the fact that it worked the month after we adopted was random. It's cliche, like they say.
Yeah.
But we had tried everything dozens of times, and for some reason we just weren't getting pregnant. And then obviously she gets pregnant the month after we adopt.
Right. Yeah, that is crazy timing. It just seems like, I mean, kids are basically, regardless of whether you plan them or not, they're always a surprise. So
they totally are.
It's like, oh, hey. But yeah, I definitely I was curious about that when I read the book, because so I had to ask. But anyways, though, it's definitely been awesome getting a chance to talk to you. And like I said, I'm really glad this, so relatable with you, as far as snowboarding. And I know you mentioned some of your life in high school. Mine wasn't exactly the same in context, but it's kind of something that the person I was back then, I wouldn't even hang out with now.
Of course.
But
that's great, dude. That's a good thing.
Yeah. But yeah, man, it's I appreciate you taking the time out to come on the podcast and, share with us a little more about the book. Is there any more other parts you want to point out to everybody that?
No, I think it's good, man. I would just invite people to go get it. Personality isn't permanent. I think it'll blow your minds. You can learn more at benjaminhardy.com. There's a lot of free resources whenever you see it. There's blogging courses if you're interested in copywriting, explaining how I've gotten millions and millions of views. There's deeper dive courses into journal writing and deeper dive courses into personality and how you can, reframe the past and design the future. All of that stuff's free for anyone who just buys the book for like 13 or 17 bucks. So the book itself is worth enough, but yeah, you can learn more at benjaminhardy.com.
All right, cool. I'll put that down in the description for the podcast episode too.
Thanks, dude.
But hey, man, it's been awesome having you on and getting to talk to you. And definitely
really nice to meet you, Greg. It's been a pleasure. See you.